In the past year or so, I've been seeing more and more snarky remarks made about Joss Whedon. That's fine. I love a good amount of snark, and I'm not going to pretend some of it is unearned. After all, it's come out that he's kind of a creep. I know, I'm as shocked as you are to hear that a guy that looks like this was a creepy guy. But here we are. But that's not why people have turned on him as an artist. It really started after Justice League was so terrible. He was brought in after Zack Snyder had to drop the film near its completion because of a horrific family tragedy. He then requested a bunch of reshoots and changed a lot of the movie to insert some humor as well as shoot some scenes less dark. And we can't pretend that Snyder doesn't have a problem with that. Then the movie was terrible. The cinematography looked a lot more generic and a lot of the jokes just didn't land and the movie was pretty bad. People started to blame Whedon and call for the Snyder Cut. Whedon clearly ruined this movie, so we want to see what it was supposed to be like because they forgot that Batman v Superman and the Man of Steel were also a little bit crap. Then the Snyder Cut was released, and it was longer. So much longer. But the story still wasn't very good, and the dialogue was actually worse, and a lot of the bad jokes that people blamed Whedon for were still there, meaning that they were actually Snyder's, or that Snyder approved of them. The only thing that I find inexcusable about the Whedon cut is Snyder's movie ends with the heroes failing and the entire world exploding from a centralized point. But Flash sees it happen in time to react, and then he runs so fast that he turns time backward and prevents the explosion from happening. Yes, Superman did that in 1978, but the sequence includes the Earth being reconstructed under his feet as he runs toward the explosion. It's honestly one of the coolest sequences in any superhero movie ever, and I don't know what would possess anyone to cut it.
This is unacceptable!
But the thing is, doing the reshoots wasn't fully Whedon's idea. Warner Brothers told him that they wanted to inject some of the humor and fun of the Avengers into DC because everyone's main complaint was the DCEU was too dour and kind of a downer overall. So he added some jokes and he refilled scenes with more lights and color as he was told to do. He also added in a number of scenes following a family that ends up nearly being killed at the end, but Flash saves. People have criticized this as being odd and feeling out of place and jarring when it cuts to them and a little boring, but that was Whedon trying to fix what he perceived as a problem with the movie, and that problem is actually now seen as a problem with all superhero movies. And that is the fact that civilians kind of don't exist anymore beyond faceless extras running in terror. Watch the Avengers and Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy. They do so much to give faces and personalities to the people of New York, which helps the audience care about the havoc being raged by the situation. Justice League also added a whole lot of wanton destruction, and Whedon wanted you to care about that fact. He didn't really pull it off, but that's clearly what he was trying to do. But all of that is beside the point that I'm trying to make here. The real thing that people have turned on Whedon about is the current level of humor in movies. It's what I was talking about in my videos about hope and fun. Nothing is taken seriously because audiences need humor, or so producers think. So jokes are added whenever possible so we don't get uncomfortable. I clearly agree that this is a problem, but I disagree with blaming Joss Whedon. The reasons for blaming him do make sense on the surface. The Avengers made all of the money. It was insanely popular and insanely quotable. Because of that, other studios looked and said, we need to make movies like that. So an order went out that all action movies need to be quippy. Now, when that kind of started, it really didn't sound like anything new. Schwarzenegger built his entire career off of being an action guy that has one-liners. But that was one character in each movie. And the point of that humor is that he's a super tough dude who doesn't fear danger, so he jokes in the face of death. The problem is that now it's every character. Every character gets to either make a joke or be the butt of the joke, and that cuts down on the realism a bit. Joss Whedon writes a movie that has a lot of jokes made by a lot of characters, and then that becomes the norm, so we blame Joss Whedon. But I contend that that's blaming the wrong person. The real people at fault are the studio executives who put the word out that that's how we make movies now. Because here's the thing. That has been Whedon's style since the very beginning of his career. He writes funny dialogue all the time, and he always has. And because of that, he is really good at it. And that is the actual problem. If the problem was Joss Whedon just inserting humor and then it was in a popular movie and everyone started to copy it, then that would be a problem with his movies. And I don't know if you've watched Avengers and or Age of Ultron recently, but they're still fantastic. Ultron still has some issues, like Thor disappearing to get in a pool to learn about the Infinity Stones and Hulk and Black Widow falling in love between movies, but the humor isn't a complaint I can make about either movie. And that's because Whedon is very, very good at it. Making that argument also ignores earlier Avengers movies. Captain America has a lot of jokes in it.
Look at that. He's making me cry.
Thor has a lot of jokes in it.
I need a horse.
We don't have horses, just dogs, cats, birds.
And give me one of those large enough to ride.
Hi, Eric. It's me. Don't worry, I'm fine. But, just in case you don't hear from me in the next hour, just come by the crater site and try and find me, okay? I did exactly what you told me not to. I'm sorry. So sorry. Bye.
Iron Man and Iron Man 2 probably have more jokes in them than the Avengers does.
No, you intimidate them.
Good God, you're a woman. I couldn't have called that. I mean, I'd apologize, but isn't that what we're going for here? I thought of you as a soldier first.
I'm an airman.
But you have actually excellent bone structure there. I'm kind of having a hard time not looking at you now. Is that weird?
I'm gonna bust this bunker with the ex-wife.
With the what? Hammer tech?
Yeah.
So is it really Joss Whedon's fault? I don't think so. Because, again, the problem is that Joss Whedon is very good at it. And the people imitating him aren't as good as he is. And I don't mean that he's just funnier than they are. It would be really hard to make a case for him being funnier than James Gunn. Honestly, I think we could probably blame him a lot more than Joss Whedon. Where his skill is the types of jokes that he makes, when he makes them, and who he lets make them. So for example, I watched a video recently that way more eloquently made the point that I did in my Hope video. I recommend it highly, it's a great video, but I disagreed with a clip that he used to make a point. Again, I'm not calling this guy out, I just disagree with this one point. I'm gonna link the video inside of my description because you should watch it, it's really good.
And I will not be bullied by that.
This is a scene from Joss Whedon's The Avengers. You've probably seen it before. In fact, you've probably laughed at it before. I know I did back in 2012, along with every single other person in the entire cinema. And realistically, how could we not? It was such a surprise, such a hilarious subversion of the classic villain monologue.
First off, I disagree that this is a subversion. It's more of a surprise. It is a joke. And it's really funny, and it gets the audience howling, but it doesn't ruin the pacing or the immersion of the scene. How so? First off, when does this joke happen? It's not in the middle, so any emotion in the scene itself has already run its course. None of our feelings or tension or sadness are broken by this moment in this scene. It's also near the end of the climax of the full battle, so our tension about that isn't ruined by a brief laugh. There are two things that need to be dealt with in the Battle of New York: the aliens and Loki. This is Loki being dealt with. It's the end of one of the main points of tension, so it goes along with that release. And then it's also before the nuclear bomb becomes an issue, so when that is introduced, it helps ramp the tension back up after we have this laugh. Second, there's a broader context to this moment that makes this joke not just funny, but cathartic in a story sense as well. Since the first Thor movie, Loki has been an arrogant twerp. He thinks he's better, more clever, faster, etc. Then he arrives on Earth at the beginning of the Avengers and immediately declares that he's here to rule the world.
I come with glad tidings of a world made free.
He calls humanity ants.
We have no quarrel with your people.
An ant has no quarrel with a boot.
He says he's better than humanity.
You think yourself above them.
Oh, yes.
That it is his rightful place to rule them.
Is this not your natural state?
Then, that attitude continues when he's confronted by the Hulk.
Enough! You are all of you beneath me. I am a god, you dull creature.
And Hulk's response is a hearty helping of humility. It is a fitting end to Loki's part of this story. And there's even more to it than that. It reveals things about characters. You see, there's a transition in this moment that lasts for the rest of the MCU. The first Thor movie ends with Loki fighting Thor. This movie also has Loki fighting Thor. And Loki doesn't try that again after this moment. He thought that he was on an almost equal footing with Thor. He only barely lost each fight with his adopted brother. Then, earlier, Thor fought the Hulk, and it was a pretty even match. It kind of ended in a tie. So, in Loki's eyes, that means that he can go toe-to-toe with Hulk as well. And he can't. We already knew that Thor loved his brother, but Loki now knows that Thor has always been holding back in fighting him. Hulk only barely beat Thor if he did it all, which means that Thor could also annihilate Loki if he really tried. All of those things is included inside of this joke. For another example, let's look at this more subtle laugh that we get earlier.
You sure about this?
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
This one works partially because of filming technique. We don't really dwell on the joke. It's said, then it's over, and the movie keeps going. Second, it's not a hilarious crowd pleaser joke. Third, ScarJo's delivery is fantastic.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
The spirit behind the joke is this character is scared of something she's about to do. So she's making a joke to try to feel just a little bit more brave. And that is the main thing behind Whedon's skill as a joke teller versus his many disciples. The jokes, more often than not, are not actually jokes. They're funny things that those specific people would say in that specific situation. He also shows a great deal of restraint. Think about Cap's first scene inside of the Avengers. There is no joke. There's a setup for a very subtle joke later.
The world has gotten even stranger than you already know.
At this point, I doubt anything would surprise me.
$10 says you're wrong.
But there's no joke in the scene itself. Later, Cap does make a joke.
Monkeys. I do not understand.
I do. I understood that reference.
But he also doesn't. He says something that's funny, but he himself doesn't intend it as a joke. The reason that works so well is that it's a statement that Cap himself sets up. He's from a different era. He's missed out on 65 years. 65 of the most transformative years in world history. And he is doing his absolute best to keep up. And he's doing okay. But then in comes Tony, who has references to things that he's never heard of with a machine gun approach to it.
No hard feelings, Point Break. You got a mean swing. That man is playing Galaga. Thought we wouldn't notice, but we did.
Then Tony and Bruce start using science jargon, and he has no clue what any of it means.
He'd have to heat the cube to 120 million Kelvin just to break through the Coulomb barrier.
Unless Sebek has figured out how to stabilize the quantum tunneling effect.
Well, if he could do that, he could achieve heavy ion fusion at any reactor on the planet.
And Chris Evans spends the entire sequence looking more and more confused and low-key frustrated. So when Fury references a movie from 1939 that Cap actually saw, and Thor doesn't know what he meant, he's so excited to have understood the first thing that he understood since Tony entered the room that it just pops out.
I do.
A perfectly fine, funny line that Chris Evans understood the motivation behind well enough to give just the right delivery to make the context clear to the audience. I keep using Cap as my examples because he gets the least amount of jokes because, honestly, that's how it should be. He also has this joke before he chases down Thor, Loki, and Iron Man.
These guys come from legend. They're basically gods.
There's only one god, man. And I'm pretty sure he doesn't dress like that.
Joking during a fight can take people out of it, but I love a joke before a fight when it's done right, because using humor to cope with fear like Black Widow did in the earlier clip is a natural human reaction. If you haven't seen Joss Whedon's Serenity, you absolutely should because it's amazing. But it's also full of these kinds of things. Jokes that aren't jokes, just funny things that people say that are right for that character in that moment. So that's my conclusion. While it is Whedon's fault, I don't honestly blame Whedon. I blame the people that try to copy him without understanding what it was he was doing, as well as the producers that encourage them to keep doing that. Well, you'll see me next time if you subscribe.